The night was cold, and the streets were almost empty. Jack pulled his jacket tighter around himself as he walked home from work. The city was quiet, except for the distant sound of traffic. He was tired, hungry, and just wanted to get home. As he passed a small alleyway, something caught his eye, a shadow moving near the trash bins. At first, he thought it was just a stray animal, but then he saw a figure crouching there. It was a girl. No, not a human girl. Her skin had a faint blue glow, and her silver eyes reflected the dim streetlights. Her long, dark hair was messy, and her clothes were torn. She was shivering. Jack stopped. His heart pounded. An alien? Here, in the city. The girl looked up, her eyes filled with fear and desperation. She hesitated, then weakly raised a small, trembling hand. "Food," she whispered. Jack hesitated. He had seen homeless people before, but never an alien. She looked exhausted, her thin body barely able to stand. His first instinct was to walk away. This isn't my problem. But then he saw something in her eyes. Pain, hunger, and something else. Loneliness. Jack sighed. "Wait here," he said. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a sandwich he had saved for later. He slowly extended it toward her. The alien girl's eyes widened. She grabbed the sandwich quickly, but didn't eat it right away. Instead, she looked at Jack, as if asking for permission. He nodded. She took a small bite, then another. Within seconds, she was eating hungrily, her hands shaking. Jack watched in silence. What happened to her? Why is she alone? After finishing the sandwich, the girl lowered her head. "Thank you." Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper. Jack sighed again. He knew this was a bad idea, but he couldn't just leave her here. "Come on," he said. "You can't stay out here in the cold." The alien girl hesitated, then slowly stood up. She followed him. Jack had no idea what he was getting himself into. But something told him this was just the beginning. The dim glow of the emergency lights cast eerie shadows across the wreckage. The alien girl, still weak and barely conscious, stirred slightly. The human, named Daniel, knelt beside her, checking her condition. Her wounds were deep, her breathing shallow. Daniel knew he had to act fast. He tore a piece of cloth from his jacket and pressed it against the worst of her injuries, trying to stop the bleeding. Her strange, almost translucent skin shivered under his touch. She was colder than any human should be. Her eyes fluttered open. For a moment, confusion and fear flickered in them. She tried to speak, but her voice was barely a whisper. "Easy," Daniel said gently. "You're safe." She stared at him, clearly struggling to understand his words. But then her gaze softened, as if she recognized that he was trying to help. Daniel looked around. The crash site was dangerous. Sharp metal, flickering sparks, and the distant sound of approaching predators. He couldn't leave her here. "All right," he muttered. "Looks like I'm carrying you." Carefully, he lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, almost weightless. As he moved through the wreckage, she clutched weakly at his jacket, as if afraid of being left behind. "Don't worry," he assured her. "I'm not leaving you." The trek back to his shelter was slow. The forest around them was dark, full of unknown dangers. But Daniel kept going. He had found her, and now he had a responsibility. As they reached his small cabin, he kicked open the door and laid her gently on the bed. The alien girl blinked up at him, her breathing still unsteady. Daniel quickly grabbed a medkit. He didn't know much about alien biology, but he had to try. He cleaned her wounds carefully, wrapping them in fresh bandages. She winced but didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers curled slightly, as if trying to grasp his hand. For a long moment, they just stared at each other, two beings from different worlds, thrown together by fate. Daniel sighed. "Guess we have a lot to figure out." The alien girl, exhausted, finally let her eyes close. Daniel watched her for a moment before leaning back, running a hand through his hair. This was just the beginning. The alien girl, weak and hungry, sat near the fire, watching the human cook food. Her golden eyes reflected the flames, full of curiosity. She had never smelled anything like this before. The rich aroma of cooked meat made her stomach tighten with hunger. The human, named Jake, glanced at her and smiled. "You'll like this. It's simple but good." He carefully handed her a small piece of roasted meat. She hesitated for a moment. Her kind usually ate raw food, but she was too hungry to refuse. Slowly, she took a bite. Her eyes widened in surprise. The flavors exploded in her mouth, warm, smoky, and rich. She chewed slowly, savoring every second. "This," she whispered, looking at him with amazement. "This is delicious." Jake chuckled. "Told you." He handed her another piece, and this time, she took it without hesitation. As she ate, she watched him closely. He was different from the other beings she had met before. Most would have ignored her. Some might have hurt her, but Jake, he shared his food, his warmth, and even his kindness. "Why are you helping me?" she finally asked. Her voice was soft, but there was suspicion in her eyes. Jake shrugged. "Because you needed help." She frowned. "But humans and my kind, we are not friends." Jake poked at the fire with a stick. Maybe it's time that changed. The alien girl looked down, thinking. She had always believed humans were selfish, cruel creatures. But this one was different. Could she trust him? The wind outside howled through the trees, shaking the small shelter they had found. The night was cold, but the warmth of the fire and the kindness of a human made her feel something strange. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, she had found an ally in this strange world. The night was cold, and the distant stars shimmered in the dark sky. The human, Daniel, sat near the small fire he had built inside the cave. Across from him, the alien woman, Naira, watched him carefully. Her glowing blue eyes reflected the firelight, and her delicate antennae twitched slightly. For the past few days, Daniel had shared his food with Naira, and in return, she had told him stories of her lost world. There was a strange trust growing between them, though neither fully understood the other's ways. Naira hesitated before speaking. "Why did you help me, human?" Daniel looked at her, surprised by the question. "Because you needed help," he said simply. She tilted her head, considering his answer. "But I am not like you." Daniel chuckled. "That doesn't matter. You're still a person." Naira lowered her gaze, her sharp claws tracing a pattern in the dirt. "Among my kind, no one would do such a thing for a stranger." Daniel took a deep breath. "Maybe that's the difference between us. Humans, we look out for each other, or at least we try." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled softly, filling the silence. Then suddenly, there was a noise outside the cave, something moving in the darkness. Naira's ears perked up, and Daniel grabbed a nearby stick, ready to defend himself. A deep growl echoed through the air. Naira tensed. "That's not one of my people," she whispered. "Something is hunting us." Daniel's heart pounded. "Then we need to be ready." As the shadow outside grew larger, both of them prepared for whatever was coming their way. The cold night air pressed against Jaden's skin as he carefully stepped through the dense forest. The alien girl, Lorena, followed closely behind, her glowing blue eyes scanning the darkness. They had been walking for hours, trying to stay hidden from the patrols searching for her. Jaden glanced at her, noticing how tired she looked. Her silver skin had lost some of its shine, and her breathing was heavier than before. He stopped and whispered, "We should rest for a while." Lorena shook her head. "No, we must keep moving. If they find me, they will." She paused, her voice trembling. "They will not let me go again." Jaden clenched his fists. He didn't fully understand what she had done to be hunted, but he knew one thing. He couldn't let them take her. A rustling sound nearby made them both freeze. Jaden's heart pounded. Was it the patrol? Slowly, he pulled Lorena behind a tree, his hand resting protectively on her arm. The sound grew closer. A shadow moved in the moonlight. Jaden grabbed a rock from the ground, ready to throw it if needed. But then, a small creature with 6 legs scurried out from the bushes. He exhaled in relief. Lorena let out a soft chuckle. "You were ready to fight that tiny thing." Jaden shrugged. "Hey, better safe than sorry." Despite their dangerous situation, she smiled. A rare sight. Jaden found himself staring at her for a moment longer than he should have. There was something about her, something that made him want to protect her no matter what. But the moment was short-lived. A distant sound of voices carried through the trees. Lorena stiffened. "They are getting closer." Jaden grabbed her hand. "Then let's go." Without another word, they ran deeper into the forest, disappearing into the darkness. The alien girl, Soraya, stared at the human with wide, uncertain eyes. Her species had never trusted humans, but this one, Darren, had saved her life more than once. She clutched the small package of food he had given her, feeling an odd warmth in her chest. Darren sat on a rock nearby, poking at a small fire. "You should eat," he said casually, not looking at her. "You haven't had a proper meal in days." Soraya hesitated. Her pride told her to refuse, but her hunger won. Slowly, she unwrapped the food and took a bite. Her sharp teeth cut through the soft bread, and her eyes widened in surprise. It was simple, but delicious. "You like it?" Darren asked with a grin. She nodded, chewing quickly. "It's different, but good." The forest around them was quiet except for the crackling fire and distant sounds of nocturnal creatures. The tension between them had eased, but Soraya still had doubts. "Why are you helping me, human?" she asked. Darren leaned back on his hands, looking up at the sky. "Because it's the right thing to do." Soraya frowned. "Even if it puts you in danger?" He shrugged. "Danger is everywhere, but letting someone suffer when I can help, that's worse." His words puzzled her. Among her kind, survival was everything. Mercy was a weakness, yet this human risked himself for no reason other than kindness. A sudden rustling in the bushes made them both tense. Soraya's sharp ears caught the sound of footsteps. Multiple. She jumped to her feet, her claws ready. Darren grabbed his knife. "Stay close," he whispered. 3 figures emerged from the darkness. They were not human. Soraya's heart pounded. These were her own people, hunters sent to track her down. "Soraya," one of them growled. "You've been running for too long. Time to come home." She clenched her fists. "I am not going back." Darren stepped beside her, eyes locked onto the stranger's. "She's not going anywhere she doesn't want to." The lead hunter sneered. "And you think you can stop us, human?" Darren smirked. "Try me." The fire crackled between them, casting shadows over their tense standoff. The night was cold, and the sky was filled with countless stars. The alien girl sat quietly by the fire, her glowing eyes reflecting the flickering flames. The human, sitting across from her, could feel the tension in the air. They had been through so much together, yet something still troubled her. "You're not telling me everything, are you?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. She hesitated for a moment before lowering her gaze. "There is something important," she admitted. He leaned forward. "Then tell me." She took a deep breath and finally spoke. "My people, they will come for me. And when they do, they will not let me stay with you." The words hit him like a punch to the chest. He had known this day would come, but he hadn't expected it so soon. "How much time do we have?" he asked. "Not much," she whispered. "Maybe a few hours." The fire crackled between them, but the warmth it provided did nothing to ease the chill in his heart. He looked at her, trying to memorize every detail. The soft glow of her skin, the way her eyes shimmered with emotions, the way she bit her lip when she was nervous. "What do you want to do?" he finally asked. She looked up at him, her expression torn between duty and desire. "I don't want to leave," she admitted. "But if I stay, They will see you as a threat." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Then we run." Her eyes widened in shock. "Run? Where would we go?" "I don't know," he admitted, "but I won't let them take you away." For the first time since they met, she saw real determination in his eyes. It wasn't just kindness or curiosity anymore. It was something stronger, something unbreakable. She reached out and took his hand. "If we run, they will hunt us. Then we'll make it difficult for them," he said with a smirk. A sudden noise in the distance made them both freeze. A deep humming sound filled the air, growing louder every second. "They're here," she whispered. He tightened his grip on her hand. "Then let's go." Without another word, they ran into the darkness, leaving the fire behind. The night swallowed them as the stars above watched their desperate escape. The day had arrived when everything seemed to change. After weeks of unexpected twists, dangers, and mysteries, Alex and Zara stood at the edge of something new. Their journey together had taken them far from the ordinary, and now, standing under the soft glow of the alien sky, they were ready to face whatever came next, together. Zara had been through so much. She had faced betrayal, confusion, and pain. But with Alex by her side, she felt a strength she hadn't known before. His unwavering belief in her and his bravery had turned her world upside down, making her realize that perhaps humans weren't as weak as the rest of the galaxy had believed. In Alex's eyes, she saw hope, and in his actions, she saw determination. He had saved her more times than she could count, and now it was her turn to stand by him. "We're not alone anymore," Zara said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. She had never expected to find someone like Alex, someone who understood her, who was willing to fight for her. It felt unreal. Alex smiled at her, his eyes full of warmth. "No, we never were," he replied, his voice steady and full of certainty. "And now we'll face whatever comes next together." Their bond had grown beyond friendship. It was something more, something deep and unbreakable. There had been moments of fear, of uncertainty, but each challenge had only drawn them closer. The journey had been hard, but in the end, it was worth it. Zara no longer felt like an outsider. She felt like she had found a place in the universe, a place with Alex. As the sky shifted into a darker shade, signaling the approach of night, Alex took Zara's hand. They stood together, silently acknowledging the bond they had formed, the love that had blossomed between them despite the odds. They had survived a war, faced monsters, and defied the expectations of everyone around them. They had proven that love, trust, and loyalty could overcome even the most impossible challenges. Zara looked up at him, her eyes sparkling with a mix of gratitude and affection. "I never thought I'd find a human who would do all this for me," she whispered. "You're different, Alex. You've changed everything." Alex chuckled softly, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "I think you're the one who changed everything," he said, his voice gentle but full of conviction. "You showed me what it means to fight for what matters, to stand up for someone, even when it seems impossible." The stars above them twinkled, a reminder of how far they had come. The journey wasn't over, but it had taken them to a place where they knew they could face anything as long as they were together. Their story was just beginning, and no matter what the future held, they were ready to face it with courage and love in their hearts. Together, they walked into the unknown, knowing that no matter where life took them, they would always have each other. As the days passed, the relationship between the human and the alien grew stronger. They learned to trust each other more with every passing moment. The alien, whose name remained a mystery, seemed to be slowly opening up. Though her behavior was often strange, she was always kind and protective, especially when danger lurked nearby. One evening, as the sun began to set and the sky painted itself in shades of red and purple, the human sat on the balcony of his house. The alien was beside him, her eyes fixed on the horizon. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't easy either. They both seemed to have thoughts too deep for words. I never thought I'd meet someone like you. The human finally spoke, breaking the silence. The alien turned her head to look at him. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, and her lips parted. Though no sound came out, she wasn't sure what to say. The human had done so much for her already, more than she had ever expected. She had hoped for safety, but never for friendship. I don't know what I would have done without you, the human added, his voice soft, but filled with sincerity. The alien felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. It was something she couldn't describe. She had come from a place where emotions were complicated, often suppressed. But with him, things were different. There was a certain simplicity to how he looked at her, like she wasn't just a creature from another world, but a being worth knowing. For a moment, they sat together in silence, just listening to the sounds of nature around them. The rustling leaves, the distant chirping of birds, the gentle evening breeze. It was peaceful, and it gave the alien a sense of belonging she hadn't realized she needed. As the night began to fall, the alien stood up and walked over to the human. She hesitated for a second before placing a hand gently on his shoulder. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The human looked at her, surprised. "For what?" "For everything," she replied softly. In that moment, something clicked between them, an understanding that words couldn't capture. It wasn't about saving or being saved anymore. It was about two souls finding comfort in each other, despite the differences that separated them. As the stars began to appear in the sky, the alien and the human stayed by the balcony. Side by side, their hearts a little lighter, knowing they had each other in this vast, unpredictable world. The sun had already set, and the world was bathed in the soft glow of twilight. The alien woman, whose name was Ilya, was sitting on the porch, her eyes reflecting the stars above. She had been through so much, but she was finally starting to feel at peace. The human, whose name was Alex, stood beside her, his gaze fixed on the same stars that had always been so distant, yet now felt closer than ever. "You know," Ilya said quietly, breaking the silence, "I never thought I'd be here, sitting with someone like you." Alex turned to her, a gentle smile forming on his face. "I never thought I'd be here either, but I guess life has a way of surprising us." Ilya looked down at her hands, unsure of how to express the gratitude she felt. She had been so lost, wandering through her own battles, but now she realized how much Alex had done for her, without expecting anything in return. The world was harsh, and people, both human and alien, often found it difficult to trust. But Alex had shown her that there was kindness in the most unexpected places. "I was scared," she admitted, "scared of what might happen if I stayed, and scared of what might happen if I left. But you made me feel safe." Alex took a step closer, his eyes softening as he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I promised you I wouldn't let anything happen to you, didn't I?" She nodded. "You did, and you kept that promise." There was a long pause as both of them sat quietly, the only sound being the rustle of the wind. It was a comfortable silence, one that spoke volumes without the need for words. After a while, Alex spoke again. "Where do we go from here?" he asked. Ilya glanced at him, her expression thoughtful. "I'm not sure yet, but maybe together we'll figure it out." Alex smiled, his eyes shining with the same hope that now filled Ilya's heart. "I think that sounds perfect." And so, as the stars above continued to shine, the two of them sat there, knowing that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. For the first time in a long while, both of them felt like they belonged.